beautiful days of the summer that God has granted us, it is a blessing to once again be with you and to share not only in the liturgical experience, but also in the company of this wonderful and loving community. Usually in our parishes and our communities, the sermon focuses on the gospel message, on the passage which is given to us not only for our hearing, but also for our study and meditation. Or at times we might hear of the feast, should the church be celebrating some major feast as the Transfiguration or the Exaltation of the Cross. And with this usual pattern, the epistle readings are usually overlooked. They somehow fall to the side. And yet in many of the epistle readings, we find not only deep and serious meaning for our lives, we find the history of the early church and the practical expressions. We see what the difficulties were and the challenges of those communities. And it is for those reasons as well as others that St. Paul took pen in hand to write the epistles and to clarify and to teach the message of salvation. This morning's epistle, if you were in church to hear it, and if you were not, it has been printed for you. And those of you who are computer literate, you know that you can receive all the readings daily. And you can find them on your screen by going to the Archdiocesan website and page. This morning's epistle is taken from Paul's letter to the Romans. And it ends in a very beautiful way. He says, accept one another as Christ has accepted you. Thank you. There perhaps is the essence and the meaning, along of course with the message of salvation that the church gives to all people. Accept one another as Christ has accepted you. It means that we accept other individuals, other people into our community and into our lives unconditionally. For Christ has accepted us unconditionally. He says, don't look at the burden and the sack. Don't look at the faults of another. But let them come into this community, into this church, and let them be healed, and let them be made whole. Christ says, welcome them as I welcomed you. And if you read and you study the scriptures, you see that Christ welcomed not only the harlots and the prostitutes, he welcomed the tax collectors and the sinners. For the Church of Christ produces saints, but it invites sinners into its midst. It invites those people from the ways of the world. It invites those people who are troubled. The church opens its doors to each and every individual so that we might find salvation. And we are called to welcome everyone as Christ has welcomed and accepted us. I ask myself at times, why are our parishes not growing and flourishing? And it's perhaps because we haven't listened to that line, welcome others as I have welcomed you. We place ourselves sometimes in neighborhoods and communities, and over the generations, the neighborhood, the community begins to change. And the first thing that we consider is, when shall we leave and where shall we go? Our purpose is not to leave cities and communities and to take our bags of the church and to move. The purpose is to place the church into those troubled areas, to leave the church there as a ballast in the storms of life, to have the church there with its message of salvation, to welcome each and every individual, those people from the Safeway and those people who work in the shops across the street, those people whom we call our neighbors, and yet we've never invited them into our homes for a glass of water. And if you look also into the epistle reading today, Christ tells us through the words of St. Paul that we are to live in harmony. When you welcome someone into your life and to your world unconditionally, you begin to develop the relationship of love. For love is not only that expression between a man and a woman, an expression between two people. It is an expression between friends. It is an expression between a child and a parent. It's an expression between two community members who accept one another and live according to the words and the teachings of Jesus Christ. Someone asked me once when I was living in Hong Kong about the Orthodox style of missionary activity. And it is not that of those other communities that we go on street corners and ask, "Are you saved?" The Orthodox style of missionary work and the expression of truth is not to pound on doors and to hand out leaflets. It is rather to live Jesus Christ by witness and by love, and to welcome each and every person into the church and let them become part of this community. When I was studying at the University of Florida, I was invited on several occasions by Christians of other communities to visit their church and their parish. At that time, there was no Orthodox church in Gainesville. I wonder how many times we invite our friends, or we invite other college students, or we invite our neighbors and say, "Would you like to come and worship with me? Would you like to visit our church on this day?" Because, as you may know, the average American on a Sunday morning does not go to church. And I'm not speaking of the Orthodox Christians, I'm speaking of society at large. How nice it would be if each and every one of us brought someone to Christ. It's not only the job, if you might use that expression, of the clergyman to bring people into the church. It's our responsibility as Christians. But to teach them and to show them and to give them Jesus Christ as he really is, not as we think he is. Too often we look into the dome, especially of the Byzantine churches, and look at the austere judge, Jesus Christ. And we forget that he is the Christ of compassion, the Christ of mercy, the Christ of love, and the Christ of healing, as you heard in this morning's gospel. And if you weren't in church in time to hear the gospel message, take that paper home and read it. Read it as a family before you have your meal. Sit and meditate on it. And then go back to the epistle reading and welcome one another into your hearts and into your homes and into this community. If we do so, then Christ certainly is in our midst. For where he is, there's love and there's patience. There's endurance and forbearing. There is mercy and there is peace. And we invite people to come and share that and to live that grace and that message of truth with us and through his church to find salvation. And may each and every one of us become not only a messenger but also an ambassador of Jesus Christ and of his acceptance for people with their burdens and with their sins, with their wrongdoings, with their errors, their mistakes, and their challenges. Let them come into the church and let them be healed like the blind man or an epileptic. Let them be made whole and let them be made Christians through his love and mercy. Amen.